Good morning, and welcome back to another episode of the Mysticism Decoded Podcast. I am your host, Aleph. In this episode, I wanted to continue on with the audiobook and analysis of the gateway process. Last, we left off on section 26, Quality of Consciousness. We got into some very important concepts and ideas regarding how consciousness comes to be aware of itself, some implications related to the golem, which I talked about is a humanoid soulless automaton mentioned in the Torah, the Old Testament, and other books of Jewish commentary, and is also a critical component of the first book of Kabbalah, the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, where we are given instructions as to how to create a golem. And of course, the book that I wrote, Connect to Source, compares the Sefer Yetzirah to this document, the CIA gateway process, to draw conclusions as to how they are talking about the same thing using different language. And just for another short recap, the Sefer Yetzirah, half of it is about the genesis of the universe, which correlates to this document in terms of how the universe was created and the persona and characteristics of the all-creator God, referred to as Ein Sof, the infinite no end, in the Sefer Yetzirah. And the other half of the Yetzirah talks about the creation of a golem, or more so describes the creation of a golem, which I submit to you, the science of which is laid out here in the declassified CIA document, The Gateway Process. More so in the section called Patterning, which we did not get up to yet. But in the previous section, Quality of Consciousness, it explains why the golem, who is soulless, still is a conscious entity capable of receiving instruction, performing and executing certain tasks. And this has to do with the consciousness of the body itself. So if you want to understand that in greater depth, I invite you to watch the previous episode of this series on section 26, Quality of Consciousness. And of course, we'll be getting into it much more deeply whenever we hit the patterning section, but even more when I start covering my book in the next series that I start after I conclude the gateway process. So now we are up to consciousness in perspective. And as we go through this section, I have queued up a couple of videos for you guys to help drive the points. One has to do with what happens when we die, and we have correlating stories from many near-death experiences to confirm this. So I have a short clip from a near-death experience story to share with you. And the other thing is from Dolores Cannon, who is a very well-known psychologist, hypnotist in the metaphysical space, perhaps one of the most well-known ever. And I have a short clip queued up that talks about how she goes into these deep states of trance for her clients, or puts her clients into these deep states of trance, better said, that enable them to go into their past lives. So we'll be hitting that in just a moment. And now let's get right into consciousness in perspective. Having ascertained that human consciousness is able to separate from physical reality and interact with other intelligences in other dimensions within the universe, and that is both eternal and destined for ultimate return to the absolute, we are faced with the question, so what happens then? So before I go on to the next sentence, just to really clarify what we just read here, this first sentence is this asking or describing what happens when we die, it is stating it as a return to the absolute. Now, we understand the definition we set up from prior sections. The absolute is another name for God. God is that infinite energy in a state of infinity, which allows for a state of all potentiality. This is why the Hebrew Kabbalistic term Ein Sof translates to no end or infinite. And I submit to you that the implications are infinite consciousness, infinite creativity, infinite love, because the form of energy that God is love, where most people think love is an emotion. Yes, it's okay to think of it as such, but love is actually a form of energy, and it is the form of energy that is God. And infinite speed of vibrations. This is one of the more key translations at the heart of the Sefer Yetzirah and this document, that God vibrates at the speed of infinity. As such, he is all potentiality, all places, all knowledge, all things at once. And everything else is energy confined and slowed down so that it has form, individuality, its own frequency, and as a byproduct, its own location. And in the future, we'll be getting into why we experience our time linearly, moment to moment. I've touched on it in other pods. I still haven't gotten into it deeply yet. I write about it in great depth in my book. It has to do with how the fifth dimension interacts with the fourth dimension. And I submit to you that the Sefer Yetzirah describes the fifth dimension in what it terms as sipur, which is the Hebrew word for inform. And this is one of the translations that I'm happy to report to you is exclusive to me. No one else has ever translated this in the way that I have and connected it back to modern science the way that I have. And the way that I connected it is both using this document, another book from the 80s, part of that lost science of the 80s, How to Explore Higher Dimensions of Space and Time by T.B. Palicki, and also the science given to us by a government whistleblower from the Philadelphia Experiment and Montauk Project, whose name is Al Bielek. So this is just a preview, just the tip of the iceberg, letting you know what I'll be getting into once I start covering that in depth in the next series I do for YouTube covering my book. But okay, I just wanted you guys to understand what we're talking about here. It is saying that when we die, we go back to the absolute. And this is what ties back to near-death experiences, where we're going to hear from the clip how when you die, your soul travels through space to rejoin God. And this is a description that's not just from one person, but from many, many, many thousands of people who do not know each other, different ages, different parts of the world, different genders, different cultures, etc., all reporting the same phenomena of what happens after they die. And of course, these are near-death experiences, so they didn't stay dead. Their spirit returned to their body, either by choice or in some cases by force. But we'll understand that in greater depth in just a moment when we get to the clip. But all right, let's reread the sentence again and carry on. Having ascertained that human consciousness is able to separate from physical reality, that's an out-of-body experience, as we understand, and interact with other intelligences in other dimensions within the universe, as we said in the prior sections, prior pods, when you go out of body and you're able to escape the time-space dimensions by exceeding Planck's distance of 10 to the negative 33rd centimeters, meaning you're accelerating your vibrations to exceed Planck's distance and able to now go in these other dimensions and interact with the other conscious entities that inhabit those dimensions. And that is both eternal and destined for ultimate return to the absolute, meaning we are going to...
Something went wrong. Please try again.
Sorry about that. I don't know why my phone just went crazy there. But whenever we are able to re-enter that energy of the absolute, we know that we have made it back home. That's how it is described by many people. So what happens then? Since memory is a function of consciousness and therefore enjoys the same eternal character as the consciousness which accounts for its existence, it must be admitted that when consciousness returns to the absolute, it brings with it all the memories it has accumulated through experience in reality. So what this is saying is, once your body perishes and your soul travels through space back to the absolute and merges with that God consciousness, it still has the ability to retain its own individual memories, and as such, that is stored in your light body forever, lifetime to lifetime. And the absolute, the infinite energy, it is essentially collecting that data and storing it as well for the purpose of learning and evolving itself. So one of the main reasons for our existence is for the expansion and evolution of consciousness. As it's been described, our reality is God unfolding himself to himself in order to know himself. So not only are we evolving individually, but collectively, the universal conscious is also evolving. The return of consciousness to the absolute does not imply an extinction of the separate entity, which the consciousness organized and sustained in reality. Rather, it suggests a differentiated consciousness which merges with and participates in the universal consciousness and infinity of the absolute without losing the separate identity and accumulated self-knowledge which its memories confer upon it. So that's just what I stated. Even when you pass, your body perishes, your spiritual body returns to that absolute infinite energy. Once there, it merges with, and you are essentially part of God consciousness again, but you don't lose your individual identity or memories. What it does lose is the capability for generation of independent thought holograms, since that can be done only by energy in motion. So what you do lose is the ability to produce holograms on your own, because now you are energy in infinity, you are part of God, and only confined energy, slowed down energy, is able to produce a hologram. And as we stated from prior pods, that infinite energy that is God can perceive holograms, but it cannot produce holograms. That's why God perceives us, but we don't perceive God in the same way, because that infinite energy is not producing a hologram, yet we are. In other words, it retains the power to perceive, but loses the power of will or choice. So because you're in a state of infinite energy and you cannot produce a hologram, you have no individual will. You are part of that collective infinite energy consciousness, that God consciousness. So you retain your individual memories and your source of identity, but you cannot essentially make your own decisions because you are energy in infinity, and only once your energy is slowed down and you're able to produce a hologram can you then go ahead and make your own decisions. So this also gets to the idea of free will versus predeterminism. And also, even when we are slowed down energy and we're going through this life, as I've stated in prior pods, we have free will, but it is a limited free will. Also limited free will of the higher self. That's a bit of a more advanced topic. But we have limited free will because there are certain times that we can make our own decisions, and that branches off into different timelines based on the decision that plays out in that timeline. and all high probability decisions play out. But outside of those windows of self-choice, we are essentially going through a predetermined reality where a greater wave interference pattern is governing our wave interference pattern. And as such, we are on autopilot without even knowing it. So for example, you think that you might be making a decision of your own free will. You're going to go run an errand at a particular time that you said, all right, I'll make the decision to go do this now. But actually, it was predestined and predetermined that you were going to go run that errand at that time, and you had no say or choice in that matter. And then, of course, whenever we are not being governed by a higher source of energy, that's when you're making your own free will decisions, and you will make every high probability decision which is governed by your higher self. So still not even you specifically, but your higher self. And every high probability decision will play out. So if that morning you were considering wearing a black shirt versus a blue shirt, and you gave both serious thought because maybe you were going to a job interview and it was important and it was going to change your character, it was going to change the way you went about things, it would change what you said on that job interview, it could change whether you got the job or not. Every high probability decision is going to play out. So in one timeline, you wore the black shirt. In one timeline, you wore the blue shirt. In exchange, however, this consciousness participates in the all-knowing infinite continuum of consciousness, which is a characteristic of energy in the ever-present. Consequently, it is accurate to observe that when a person experiences the out-of-body state, he is in fact projecting that eternal spark of consciousness and memory, which constitutes the ultimate source of his identity, to let it play in and learn from dimensions, both inside and outside of the time-space world, in which his physical component currently enjoys a short period of reality. So again, this is summarizing that your consciousness is merging with the God consciousness, the all-knowing infinite continuum. Whenever you merge with it after you pass, consequently, it is accurate to observe that when a person experiences that out-of-body state, he is in fact projecting that eternal spark of consciousness. So this is also explaining that whenever you are engaging in going out of body via transcendental meditation, what you're doing is you are projecting that eternal spark, aka your spirit. And as I've described on previous pods, our spirit is light. It is literally light in an electromagnetic wave. Where God is energy in a state of infinity, energy also is light, is an electromagnetic wave. I present to you and I submit to you that technically God is an electromagnetic wave in a state of infinity, and we are our spirit, an electromagnetic wave that is confined and slowed down. As such, it is not in infinity. So what this means is that God, by definition, technically, is an infinite photon, the light God. And if you think about the New Testament, how often is God correlated with light, and is Jesus correlated with light? And also the sun, S-U-N, is energy that produces light. And as I've mentioned on previous pods, the concept of astrotheology, where Jesus is not always to be understood as God's Son, S-O-N, but God's Son, S-U-N. And for example, think about in the New Testament where it talks about Jesus walks on water. Have you ever walked on a beach towards sunset and you're watching the sun reflect off the ocean, and as you are walking down the beach and you're looking at the water, what does the sun look like it's doing? It looks like it's following you. The sun looks as if it is walking on water. This is something I'll be going into in more depth in future pods, but I just wanted to make the early correlation for you guys here as it is applicable. So now that we've read through the paragraph, we've essentially understood what happens when we pass. Our physical body perishes, our light body leaves the physical body, it goes through space, it merges with that God consciousness, and once there, it retains its own individuality, but also is able to participate in the all-knowing, the infinite consciousness, which allows you to look at anything you want, anytime you want, and to know everything that there is to know. Now let's watch these clips that help to understand this concept in a little better depth. Let's start first with the NDE story. This comes from the popular NDE channel, The Other Side NDE. This will be a short one, just about a minute or so.
I remember leaving my body and really shooting through the hospital floors and even going into the blue sky. And I remember going into outer space, and it was really fast. I used to always try to figure out how fast it was. And I do read my Bible, and I remember reading this one scripture that says to be absent from the body is to be in the presence of the Lord. And all I could say was, that was it, that was it, that was it. That's what really happened. I was moving that fast. I always say faster than a person could blink their eye. By the time the top eyelid hits the bottom one, I was already in heaven. That's how fast it was. As I was going into that realm, and I remember seeing before me that they saw like a light at the end of the tunnel because it's really dark in this one area there. And I can remember it wasn't a light just like at the end of a tunnel. To me, it was like a window. It looked like a window. I'm not saying it was a window, but that.
Okay, so just short and sweet, but we heard him describe how he passed and then he experienced himself traveling through space and joining that infinite consciousness, which even in this video, he described as light. So what did I just explain to you? God is light. God is literally a photon, an infinite photon, an infinite source of energy. Light is energy, is an electromagnetic wave. God is an infinite photon, and when you pass, that's why you are heading to the light, as so many people say. But the fact that your spirit passes through space, the cosmos, is also relevant because this is what is described in the gateway process as well, that we talked about in prior pods, that you enter this universe through a white hole, the jet of matter, via a quasar, and you exit this world, or by world I mean universe here, or reality, and you exit via a black hole. So where is a black hole? The black holes are in space. We travel through space, we exit via the black hole, and we rejoin that infinite consciousness, that infinite energy, that infinite light, the photon God, which is what he just described happened to him. And you are able to participate in the infinite consciousness once merged. Now, of course, these are NDEs, so we are to understand that even once you reach the afterlife and you merge with the infinite, you can still return to your body. And from different NDEs, we see that this is sometimes by choice or sometimes by force. So just a short and sweet description for you guys. This is a pretty cool channel in general. If you want to learn more about the afterlife, near-death experiences, things that happen when you die, I'm sure you could binge watch this channel for hours on end if you're into that sort of thing. Now, the second video that I wanted to play for you guys, this will be a little bit of a longer clip. This will be a few minutes. This is from Dolores Cannon, who is one of the best known psychologists, hypnotists in the metaphysical space ever, maybe the most well known ever. But she claims, and let's believe her for the sake of this video, that she developed a technique over 40 years of hypnotism where she was able to put her clients in a state of deep, deep trance that I'll refer to it as basically the delta state. She refers to it as something else, which we'll see in this video. Tough word to say. It starts with an S. I don't really remember how to pronounce it, so we'll just watch it. But she's able to put her clients into this state that allows them to go into past lives. And once in that state, they are able to draw knowledge and information from those past lives. And she even has a separate series of videos, the Nostradamus videos, where she explains how when she puts her clients in these past lives, she's actually communicating with not the person sitting in front of her in this timeline, this reality at that exact moment, but she is communicating with the literal person that the client is reaching back to their past life. So for example, in the Nostradamus videos, she had a client who went into a past life, who her past life was a student in the 15th century of Nostradamus. And all of a sudden, as her client was in that state, the client said to Dolores, Nostradamus would like to speak to you. So it gets even more deeper than just past life regressions, being able to look into your past lives and draw knowledge and learn from them and know what happened to you. It is even, you can almost describe it as channeling. I don't know if that is the best word, but that's the word I'll use right now, where essentially your past life can channel through your current body. And obviously on the other side, in the 15th century, this is supposedly presently materially happening because Nostradamus was able to see this happening in real time, his time, recognize it, and ask to speak to the operator on the other side, which was Dolores Cannon. And as such, the 15th century past life individual became a conduit from that end. And then the current time individual client of Dolores became essentially a channeler for that past life in the 15th century. And now Nostradamus is communicating with Dolores through A, the 15th century past life individual, B, the current time Dolores client, and they are communicating through each other through that medium. So that's a very interesting capability and functionality of past life regression as well, which I believe she touches on a bit in this clip, but also she goes into a description of how she puts her clients in the proper state. So this clip will be a few minutes long, about 4 minutes long, but let's go ahead and watch this now.
How deep are you taking them?
The deepest possible level there is. The other hypnotists are taught to keep them in the light level. In the light level, the person is going to remember a lot. They'll say, oh, I made a whole thing up, this is silly, nothing was working. I read it in a book, I saw it in a movie. That's the light levels of trance.
How deep, how do you take someone that deep though?
I get the conscious mind out of the way. The conscious mind is the one that's saying those things. I made it up, I read it in a book, etc., etc. Because the conscious mind has to be in control, even though it doesn't know anything. That's the way it is. So in the technique that I use, we push the conscious mind out of the picture. And I go into the deepest possible level of trance, which is called the somnambulistic level. At that level, the person doesn't remember what they said or did. Okay. So you get they are really, we're traveling in time. It's like I call it a time tunnel. You're back in time.
So is that the same as some people say connecting to your higher self?
That's a different thing altogether. What they're saying is not what they're really doing.
do they understand what they're doing when they
I
use
don't
those
think
words?
so. They say that they're not doing it.
Okay, so all your information is taken from clients, isn't it? And sorry, did you want to finish there?
Yeah, because I have found a way to directly connect to the higher self and let it come through the clients and answer all the questions and do the instant healing. But it's different than what they say it is, because I'm the only one that's doing this and teaching it that I know of
Okay.
how to do this. You get them very, very deep, and you
Yeah.
have miraculous results.
So you're teaching people, and you've been teaching people over the many years you've been doing this. And is that in the book, in your books, the information of how to go to that level? Is it no?
Yep.
That's something you personally teach.
I only teach it because anything is dangerous in the wrong hands, and if you don't know what you're doing. So when I'm giving my classes, it's full of safeguards to make sure that they do it correctly. I tell them step by step, follow what I tell them, and then there's no harm to anyone.
But how did you discover this technique?
Gradually, over 40 years,
40 years to discover and to build one technique
to
up.
perfect it.
Wow. So when you first did this, like you've said in the interview, you didn't really know what you were communicating
No,
with.
it was
or
just,
it was-
in those days, it was just habits.
Yeah.
And it was a long, drawn-out inductions, watch the shiny object, those kind of things.
And you're not doing that
Oh,
anymore?
none of that
No.
is done anywhere anymore. It's only used on television and movies for dramatic effect.
Or, as you would say, those who are taking others to just a very shallow level.
But even
compared
that,
to-
that method is so outdated. If anybody's doing that, they're way behind the times. But I found a way to cut out the things that were unnecessary in hypnosis, and I added other things to make it fast and quick, and we go directly to what I call the source of all knowledge.
But how do you know that person, even though they're in that very deep trance, aren't just feeding you what you want to hear and they...
It's impossible.
Yeah.
When you're in the deepest possible level, you cannot make up anything. And besides, when we go to this higher consciousness, it always has the same voice, always uses the same terms and phrases, and no one would know what they were looking for.
I see. So that's pretty
That
key
is,
there.
we always know when it's there.
And can you pick up conversations you've had with one person with it, and then sort of, you're with someone else in a deep trance, and they're reading off what you've already talked about with someone else?
Yes, this is
Incredible.
what they do. This is the amazing thing. In my work now with the Convoluted Universe series, we're getting all these complicated theories and concepts in metaphysics that no one has ever heard of before. And that's the way it comes through. It'll come through one client, and then maybe a week later, I'll have it come through another client, and they'll add more to it. So it's never just through one person. It's through thousands of people that I work with. My job is to put it all together like a puzzle, a piece here and a piece there. And that's how I get the stories of how it all happened. It can't happen through just one person.
No.
But they don't know what I've found.
Is
And
everything
so-
revealed once they've come out of the
Yes,
trance?
and everything.
Okay, so that was a short clip, and this channel is called the International Spiritual News Network. I've never actually watched anything from this channel before, so I can't really talk about it too much, but they had this interview here with Dolores Cannon, which was applicable. So again, the reason I showed these two clips is because it is proving what is described here in section 27, Consciousness in Perspective, regarding that one, when we pass, we do go ahead and merge with the God consciousness, yet we are able to retain our identity. That's exactly what was described in the first video. Additionally, he explicitly described it as returning to the light. And as I explained to you, the light is the infinite photon, is what we call God, is that energy in a state of infinity. Energy equals light per Albert Einstein's original formula, where we in America know it as E equals mc squared. He originally wrote it as L equals mc squared. So energy equals light. Light equals an electromagnetic wave. God is an infinite photon. Our spirit is a photon as well, is light, the same as that infinite energy, but it is not vibrating at the state of infinity. As such, it is confined and slowed down. However, we've talked about in this document being able to return to God consciousness via the method of samadhi. So we know that at any time we can raise our vibrations to reach the level of infinity, where we can merge with God consciousness even before dying. But once you pass, it just happens automatically. And the other video that I showed that we just watched, Dolores Cannon, is to show that our spirit is obviously eternal. As such, we can understand from a scientific perspective why it is that reincarnation is real. And reincarnation is something I'll go into in more depth in future videos. Eventually, I want to do a series just on the science of reincarnation and tie it back to the Kabbalistic text called the Sefer Gilgul, which has to do with just that, the science of reincarnation. But obviously, if we reincarnate, that means we have past lives. So she, as a psychologist / hypnotherapist, developed a technique to put her clients in a deep state of trance that they are able to access their past lives. And once you do so, you can draw knowledge and information from the past lives. And in a more advanced functionality, everything I mentioned regarding her Nostradamus stories. But that's a whole different ball of wax on its own. It's quite fascinating. And again, if this is your first video that you're watching here and a lot of this just sounds completely insane to you, the crux of my work here, or one of the most important facets that I'm looking to explain, and I explain in my book, is that we live essentially in God's imagination. We are God's imagination crystallized. So anything that could be thought of and conceived can be real. So it's easier to think about this in modern terms as a digital computer simulation, as smart people who are not spiritual describe simulation theory. However, it is exactly equivalent to a computer simulation, but instead of a computer, it is really God's imagination. And what that means is God is energy in a state of infinity, and everything that is not in that infinite state of energy is energy slowed down, confined energy, which gives it form and individuality and location. But everything is just a manipulation of energy. So anything is possible. Time travel, reincarnation, past lives, different timelines, different universes. There is no such thing as impossible. It is only a matter of thoughts. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode today. In the next episode, we'll be picking up with section 28, the gateway method. And this is going to start getting into the more specific protocols of how to induce hemisync. And it gets into basically more advanced protocols and functionalities and things that you can do while in the out-of-body state. So we're heading into the last third of the document. The document's about 30 pages long. We are nearing the end of page 19 here. We should have just a handful more of videos on this document. Some of these sections are going to be worthwhile doing in one video, especially this section here, advanced techniques. But then again, these paragraphs are pretty long, so I might not be able to do them in one video. And especially patterning, definitely not. So actually scratch that. So we might have a decent amount of videos left in this series. And we are nearing the ever important section of patterning. But if you liked what you heard here today, just like everyone else asked for, please like, comment, share, subscribe. This is a new channel that I'm looking to get off the ground. The core work of this channel is really going to be to translate Kabbalistic texts or sects of Judeo-Christian mysticism, which is considered Kabbalah and also Merkava, and translate that through modern technology, modern scientific theory, and modern ufology. And not just Judeo-Christian texts, but ancient texts from other religions or just ancient texts in general. But no one is translating these ancient texts through the lenses and prisms that I intend to. No one has translated the Sefer Yetzirah in conjunction with this gateway process document in the way that I have, to the extent that I have, which is why I wrote the book. If it existed, I would not have bothered. And this first series, the gateway process, it's to just set the foundation, the scientific principles for understanding the nature of reality, the nature of the infinite consciousness, that creator that is God, understanding his characteristics and persona, to be able to then have the conviction and understanding as to why the things that we learn in these ancient texts are real and not sci-fi or make-believe. Because without the scientific foundation and understanding, you could never truly believe what it is you're going to be hearing as we get into topics such as ET human interaction, time travel, ET wars, ETs living in the core of Earth, or not the core rather, but inner Earth, and just everything that you never thought could be real, or so many questions you never thought there could be an answer for. We have the answers, we have the understanding. The information is suppressed by those that control this world for a reason, but we are expanding our consciousness as a civilization and a species. And what I'm doing and what other like-minded people are doing is to help facilitate that evolution. So stick with me. I'm going to red pill you in a way that no one else is going to red pill you. Not that other people aren't doing great work as well, but everyone has their own flair. Everyone has their own niche. And the core work that I'm going to be getting into is essentially almost completely untouched. No one looks at it, thinks about it. This is done more for the Bible, for the Torah. You have people that do that. And one book in particular from Judeo-Christian mysticism, the Book of Enoch, is also translated through these lenses and a little bit kind of well known in these micro niches. But that's it. There are many, many books of Kabbalah and Merkava and other religions to translate through this lens or these lenses. And all that's being paid attention to is the Bible and the Book of Enoch, which are great works in and of themselves. But there is a lot more to the story. So thank you one more time. Looking forward to the next one. Aleph Lev out.